Ngapai?
I think we're live now.
Well, we are live.
Hello, Kubeko?
Oh, greetings, Woody.
Yes, you are live. You may go.
We are live now.
Yeah.
Greetings to everyone watching. We greet the Wesley Guilders. We greet the non-Methodists and Methodists. Everyone watching at home, we greet you in the wonderful name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. And today we have another interesting topic with our guest, Oputi, that I'll introduce. The topic is Not in My Name, a call to men against GBV. Our guest is Mr Siyabulela Jentile. Some of you might know him. He is a civil rights activist and a social entrepreneur. But Siyabulela molo futhi unjani?
Hi, Sisi. Good afternoon. Salaz neplesha. You know, that's how messed up my day has been. Diyaphila sisakhonda kunjani?
We're good, thank you.
And thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. We are glad you honored our invite. But Siyabulela, apart from you being a civil rights activist and a social entrepreneur, please tell us more about yourself for the sake of those who don't know you and don't know anything about you.
Yeah. Thank you so much again. So igama lami Siyabulela Jentile. As you said, civic leadership practitioner or civic activist and a community activist, whichever way you'd like to say it. I'm also a social entrepreneur. In fact, I just graduated from GIBS, social entrepreneurship program, just 2 days ago. Not 2 days ago, sorry, 4 days ago, last week, Friday. My interests are mostly in civic leadership, in corporate social investment strategies. That's what I do in business. So I'm also a social entrepreneur, as I said earlier. So part of the reason why I do that is because activism is hard in South Africa. You're almost seen as a beggar. You need to beg captains of industries. You need to beg big corporates for them to assist you with funds and all that. So I study social entrepreneurship and I practice social entrepreneurship as a way of ensuring that the community work that we do is a well-oiled machine. We are able to, while sustaining impact, we're able to sustain even running costs, because in as much as we don't do it for money, we need money to do it. But besides that, I write, I speak, I'm an author. I wrote a book in 2019. Hopefully I'll be able to write again this coming year. I also I'm a conference speaker, a lot of things. I sit in different advisory councils, recently being appointed in the advisory council of the South African Youth Tobacco Free Youth program. Also in a campaign called Together First, which is based in London. I also write for the United Nations Association occasionally, which is also in London. So I'm not captured, but you know, some opportunities come and then you can't say no to. And I also got my own company as well. So I do a lot of work. There's a lot of work that I do in and outside the country, but most of my work is centralized around activism. But that has not always been the case. Just in conclusion of my introduction, that has not always been the case. My background was in fact in the built engineering, environment, engineering and built environment, whereby I went to TUD surveying. After that, I got employed in what we call now a consulting firm for 5 years, and after and I went to start an organization that is now known as, not in my name, international. Previously, not in my name, SA, which I will introduce in depth later. So, yeah, that is essentially what I do. It's quite a lot. I'm involved in a lot of programs, in a lot of initiatives. Some I even forget. So yeah, that's me. Otherwise, there's nothing special about me. And I'm just happy to be here to engage with everyone that is connected today.
Yes, we are also happy to have you here, especially in this day and time where GBV cases are increasing each day. We are hearing about new headlines about some woman killed somewhere, some child raped somewhere. So we really appreciate having you here so that we can converse about these matters. I think let's get into it. You said you're gonna get in depth with Not in My Name and
Yes.
explain to us what it is about.
Okay, so many South Africans would be aware of the hashtag Not in My Name, which is essentially it has been a campaign. It has been in existence for a very long time, and as I said earlier, that I was in the civil engineering sector for about five years before I left. And at that time, I remember it was in 2017. There was these cases you just mentioned. A lot of them, they were piling up, and our media space was filled with cases. I mean, you open up a newspaper, you turn on your radio in your car, you switch on your TV. Woman has been killed. A woman killed satellite. You'll remember the story of Fukarabo Mkwena, Soweto, and all. So all those things for me, they became a lot, and I thought, you know what? I think I have been sitting on the sidelines for far too long as a young South African. I needed to do something about it, and that is when the idea of the organization came about. But we needed to call men into taking collective responsibility, and that is why I'm excited about the particular topic of today that says Not in My Name, because I don't own Not in My Name. No one owes it. It's man, any man that says I'm not going to sit by the sidelines and watch these things happening in South Africa. That person owns the initiative. They own the organization. So we started that, and then we built on that campaign. But see, my problem with campaigns in South Africa has always been that you start a campaign and people start talking. After 3, 4, 5 days, it's like Twitter trends. Something trends for a certain period of time, and then after a certain time, abantu bayatula, they talk about something else. I start trending there, and then we trend there. Similar to what is currently happening right now. Right, it's 16 days of activism. What's going to happen after 16 days? 11, and for me, that has always been problematic. That's why then I said to the guys, after we had our first mass demonstration in Pretoria, we then need to find ways of sustaining what we have started here in Pretoria. And then I suggested that we register an organization that will then sustain the hashtag Not in My Name campaign. That is how Not in My Name International came about. And it started as Not in My Name SA. By the way, it's no longer SA. I see there on your screen. It's Not in My Name SA. It's Not in My Name International, guys. We've got members and participants from other African countries, in Kenya, in Zimbabwe, in the Democratic Republic of Congo as well, Swatini. So we are a growing organization, and the call has been the same throughout: galvanizing men, mobilizing men, calling men into taking action. So we are now called Not in My International, and we are a social justice movement now and a lobby group. As I said, that leads the Not in My Name campaign. Our focus area derived from three, which are gender equality advocacy, social relief of the distressed, as well as education and skills development. So people will remember that when we started, we were mainly focused on GBV and all that, and which is well and good, we still do that. But part of our work now, our scope is expanded into social relief of the distressed. I mean, this year alone, we have assisted just over 95,000 families with groceries during this lockdown, right? We also have got an education and skill development programs that we run within the organization, and our scope of work is in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 2, 4, 5, as well as 6. Thank you so much. I see you've changed it now. Thank you so much, admin. I really appreciate it. So just in closing about the introduction of Not In My Name International, what we do at Not In My Name International is we are trying to strengthen the foundations of our democracy by assisting citizens to understand and use the power that they possess through the Constitution. And our mandate has always been inspired by the 4 essential principles of social justice, which are human rights, access, participation, and equity. And our focus is on providing sustainable and measurable positive interventions in the lives of all people, regardless of race or gender. And we are countervailing force to those who are intent on undermining liberties and constitution. We mobilize sectors, organizations, even industries, and say, which is part of the reason why I honored this invitation today as part of this mob. So that is what we do and who we are. But for the sake of this conversation, I will then try to briefly focus on the gender equality advocacy work that we do. A lot of people will see us marching to court, assisting victims of GBV, linking victims with law enforcement agencies, with psychologists, with social workers, and all that. But our work goes way beyond that. We try by all means to get involved in the broader national and even international discourse on gender equality. As I said, that I also do a lot of work with other campaigns and other organizations outside South Africa, in London to be specific, and other African countries. So I was then asked to come and talk about the call to call men, or to make a call to men to act against GBV. And for me, this is a befitting platform as well, because of we are, within the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, or days of activism against the abuse of women and children, and that makes up a bigger part of our work. I don't know if maybe I should proceed, or is there anything you wanted to ask? So my problem is that once I start talking, I don't stop. So you'll have to stop me. You'll have to stop me there. I lost you there.
Can you hear me now?
You're on mute. Yeah.
Okay, my mic was muted. Sorry about that. Before you continue, I reckon I will have to interject here and there, because you'll talk nonstop. But before you continue, Mr Siyabulela, I just want to remind our viewers that they are welcome to ask questions while you're going on with the presentation. They can ask the questions in the comment section, and then when the time comes, or when the time is right, I'll read the questions to Mr Siyabulela Jentile so that he can respond to them. So far, I'm just interested, Bodisia, so far, how has the campaign, from being a campaign, just a campaign, to being an organization, how has it been accepted or received by the society? Have you guys faced maybe resistance somehow, maybe from females or males or anyone? But Sia? I'm not sure whether you can hear me or not.
Yeah, definitely. But the response has been positive. Hello?
I can hear you. You can proceed.
I hear you.
Okay.
Lost you now.
You can respond, but yes.
You can hear me now. Oh, I was saying, so the response is, yeah, I think we're having network issues. The response has been positive, but a larger part of it has been, and one would expect that the resistance would be from men to say that, and that has been the case, by the way. We did this, and a group of men said, we are close issues, right? You are always siding with women. You take women's issues, or you take women's sides only. You are against the rights of men. You don't want to listen to the voice of men. In fact, you are pushing a narrative. You are feminist. You are this and that, and I understood that. On the other side, you'd have a section of the female population saying the same thing, that you are in fact coming into our space as females or as women, wanting to tell our story. You are taking up our agency to tell our own stories, right? And both narratives, to be honest, were genuine, and we understood that we are coming into a space as men, which, by the way, if you look at the statistics, men are by far and large the perpetrators of gender-based violence, right? And now you have a group of men that says, "Not in my name." So we have these guys who think they are better, or who think bona, they are different from other men. And for me, that was the biggest challenge, to say, how do I manage the fears of the female population that says that you're coming into our space, you're not even genuine. You want to tell our story, let us tell our own stories, stop taking away our agency. So you needed to deal with those fears, but at the same time, by the way, this is an ongoing thing. At the same time, on the other hand, you need to deal with the fears of men who are saying that, but Chief, you are castrating us. You are you are killing our masculinities. You are destroying us as men. So you have that, but be that as it may, in the middle, in the mixture of all that, you've got the statistics that are coming out every day. A woman has been killed. A woman has been raped. A woman has been, abused, assaulted, this and that. So we try not to allow those things to deter us from the main mandate. And the main mandate is to say that on this particular part of our work, we need to support the victims. We need to try and rehabilitate men that can be rehabilitated. But most importantly, we need to call on all other men to take collective responsibility and say, "Not in my name," to this gender-based violence that is happening. So the idea that was created when we started, even now, is that we think that we are better men, or we are men who have figured life out, or we are perfect men. And that has not been the issue. In fact, most of the people who are doing this work with me, it's men and women, by the way, will tell you that, they've got their own stories. They've got pasts. We've got men who are previous abusers, who are now rehabilitated. That is why I was saying this sometime last week. This cancel culture, which I hate, by the way. They wanted to cancel Ukabelo, and I was saying on Sowetan that We need men like Ukabelo to come in and be part of the conversation and own up to say that I was an abuser at some point in life, right? But now I want to say to men, this is wrong, and the results of my actions were one, two, three, and I don't want other men to do this, and I don't want other women to suffer or go through what my team has gone through. So to answer you, the long and short of it is that the reception, and it's like anything else in life, honestly, there's nothing you can do. Even Jesus Christ, he was criticized. So there is nothing you can do. Abantu, they will criticize you for waking up, for breathing. There are people who just look at you because you're breathing and they get irritated. So there are those people living in our space. We get up and say, as a man, I'm saying, stop GBV. And they start attacking you, these women. Attack you because you're a man. What are you talking about? Yourself, you are worse, you are trash, you are that, you are that, you are that. But at the same time, you have women who are like, thank you for doing this. We need more men like you. We need people who will speak up against these things. And at the same time, you have other men who are saying, I want to join you, I want to help you, I want to support you, I want to walk this journey with you. So people will always talk, but the work will always speak for itself. We've assisted a lot of families, we've assisted a lot of victims, we've assisted a lot of children, and we've participated in the reconciliation of many families. So for me, that is the most important part about the work that we do. As for the reception, if we can wait for everyone's buy-in, unfortunately, we'll never get anything done in this country. People are always almost ready to get offended. So, yeah.
That's great. And the good thing about what you're saying is that we all know that people will always talk and we'll always have the negatives and the positives, but for as long as you stick to the cause. Let me not ask further questions. Let me let you get on with the presentation so that we can ask questions afterwards.
Okay. No, it's fine. So issue when I see gender-based violence has been a part of a national discourse for a very long time, right? In fact, even international discourse, but in South Africa, it's rife. We know that our femicide rate is 5.1 times higher than the global average. We know that, women are not safe here than anywhere else in the world. So this is the most dangerous place to be for a female or for a woman or for a girl in South Africa. And for me, I thought as part of this conversation, it was important that I try and talk about what is a man, or what is masculinity, because when we talk about gender-based violence, the first thing abantu batsibele kuyo ukubana no, this thing is influenced by toxic masculinity. And as a result, we are having a group of, or the larger part of our discourse is now, focused on attacking or dealing with this toxic masculinity. And to some extent, people start attacking masculinity itself. And for me, that has always been problematic because there's nothing wrong with masculinity. And I think we must clarify that the only thing that is wrong is toxic masculinity. So gender-based violence in South Africa and elsewhere has always been a field of academic inquiry. And I would be lying Ngati Siyabulela sitting here is an expert on GBV, or I know more than the other guy who's sitting or whoever is connecting on this live right now. I'd be lying. I'm not. But I've realized that language here tonight, it also plays a role in the work that we do. It can either regress it or it can, it can progress it. But once we start talking about masculinity with relation to gender-based violence, because men are violent because of, of what I just mentioned as toxic masculinity, we need to understand that masculinity in itself is dynamic. By dynamic, I mean that it's not static. It's a dynamic process that is influenced by many other, factors. And I always say that there is no a location or a setting where we groom violent men and say, okay, ninake, the five of you go and be violent there, and then sitiko abanoni na ambana ambanodlwengula, and then we are saying to this one, go and do this. All children are born innocent, and I think that has been the intention of God, that we are born into innocence, we are born pure. But something happens during this process as school. And for me, that is where lies the answer and the root cause of the violence that we now call gender-based in South Africa. Because these boys, they grow up picking up all this social scripts that have been passed on from one generation to another. They pick this up, violence, ifundo ekhaya. Being a good man, they also learn at home, but also there's another factor which is called, which I'll mention also later on. And then there is also a township or a suburb, wherever they stay, the environment that they stay in, it also educates them. So there's a lot of factors, but be that as it may, there are different kinds and types of masculinities. And one of them is what is referred to as hegemonic masculinity. So hegemonic masculinity is the most dominant form of masculinities in our society. It is aggressive, and we all know that. There's men who are super aggressive. It dominates hegemonic masculinity. But not only is it aggressive, it is also very competitive. Not only is it very competitive, it is also powerful, and it gets violent sometimes compared to other forms of masculinities, because it subordinates women. But the thing about it, it also subordinates men, right? And that is why I always say that even men are afraid of men sometimes. But that is another part of the conversation or layer that we hardly ever get to. So this part of, or this kind of masculinity called hegemonic, it always manifests itself in the system of, or the system that is now referred to as the patriarchy, right? And then you've got another type of masculinity called subordinate masculinity. So subordinate masculinity refers to the ways of being a man that do not live up to the traditional standards of being a man, or the traditional society standards or ideals of manhood as we know them. These are men who do not meet the so-called social expectations, or what is now referred to as a real man. This type of masculinity is always dominated by hegemonic masculinity that I mentioned earlier. And this always promotes what is called heterosexism, and the belief that everyone is heterosexual or should be heterosexual, right? And that is why also, just on subordinate masculinities, that is why I always say that when we are going to box men under the same banner, or when we condemn men under the same umbrella, or judge men using the same yardstick, we tend to alienate these men whose masculinity is subordinate, because this is where you find your members of the LGBTIQ plus community, right? Because these are the men that, according to the society, they do not meet or they do not live up to the standards of masculinity. That is why you'd be called a CC, you'll be called a wig, things like that. And then another form of masculinity, and I'm just explaining this to try and make sense of the violence in men, and which group of men is exactly violent and why are they violent. And then if we can understand that, we will then be able to try and drive a way into finding solutions. Now, there is another group of men called, or type of masculinity called complicit masculinity. So complicit masculinity, it's men who accept the rewards of hegemonic masculinity. Remember, hegemonic masculinity is the dominant one, the violent one, the aggressive, the competitive, and the powerful one. So complicit masculinity refers to the group of men that accepts the rewards of hegemonic masculinity without necessarily defending the system of patriarchy from which they benefit. And it does not, these complicit masculinity, they do not challenge the system that oppresses women and some men, but they passively accept things the way they are. And most of our work, in fact, is directed to these ones as well, because these are the men who will be like, I don't hit women, I'm not violent, I don't do whatever, but they're sitting on the sidelines, right? They do not want to participate in calling other men. But at the same time, sitting on the sidelines, benjalo, they are enjoying all the benefits that comes with the violence or with the aggression or with the competitiveness of hegemonic masculinities. And lastly, it's a group called marginal masculinities, right? And all this one it's closely also linked to the subordinate masculinities. Marginal masculinity refers to the oppressed and exploited groups, right? And it shares many of the characteristics, though, with the hegemonic masculinity, sorry, not subordinate, with hegemonic masculinities, right? In a sense that they are violent, they are domineering. But the thing with marginal masculinities is that they do not have, or they in one way or the other they lack, they have no power to act in the society, right? These men are discriminated, whether because of race. An example, the apartheid South Africa discriminated against black people, discriminated against black men, and you would have these black men now who became violent to their wives or to their girlfriends, taking out the frustrations on them and all that. So these are marginal masculinities. So it can be race, it can be ethnicity, or even socioeconomic status. For an example, immigrants, immigrant men, they often feel marginalized because of their minority status, right? But you also have men who are unemployed who often feel inadequate, or they feel as though they are not men enough because of they're unemployed, or they don't have money to, they can't provide for their families, and they're constantly seeking new ways to prove themselves or to prove that they are still real men, whatever real men is. So men have historically been or played the role of a garden warrior in human communities, largely due to the biological makeup. We cannot dispute that, guys. There's biological differences between men and women, in as much as we can call for 50-50 and equality, right? Men were generally larger and stronger than women. Women, on the other hand, played a different role, which was also important. And now, in order for us to understand the psyche or the psychology of violent masculinities in South Africa, the masculinities that I just tried to articulate, we need to first understand that masculinity as a biological makeup is not a problem. And I mentioned this earlier. The problem is toxic masculinity. So it is not wrong, or it is not a sin to be a man. It is wrong and it is a sin to be a violent man. And I think we always miss that point. So there are many reasons and there are many excuses for men to be violent, many of them being civic, meaning they are located within the context of social, economic, political, and moral culture of our societal, moral nature of our societal makeup. To discuss this individually, would take us a lot of time. You talk about unemployment, which, by the way, has gone up just today. An announcement was made. You talk about alcohol abuse. You talk about stress, sex, homophobia. You talk about depression, the role of the apartheid legacy that I just mentioned as well in the contemporary South Africa. the role played by the media, because if you want to understand what is going on within the South African masculinities, you need to look into media, how men are portrayed in the media, and I do need to emphasize, and the fact that being a man today in South Africa, talking to you right now, that makes me an immediate beneficiary, right, of a systemic organization of male supremacy and female subordination, which means I'm the one to inherit, or I'm a heir of a system of stratification and differentiation on the basis of sex, which provides material advantages to men or male, while placing while placing severe constraints on the roles and activities of females. And most of my sorry on place constraints on females. And I was born elevated in the social hierarchy mainly because I was born male. So most of my experiences and opinions have been formulated from a point of privilege. And that is why I always say to men that at Not In My Name, we learn every day, we unlearn every day, right? So I'm a beneficiary of a system that has survived for so long because, unfortunately, and in fact, in many instances, it has been sustained by the very same women that it oppresses. And we cannot deny that we are in a dilemma as a people of South Africa, in fact, the whole world. This is because this violence we call gender-based, femicide, rape culture, and sexism are global challenges. And in most instances, they've been perpetuated by me as a man and fellow men all over the world, right? So to understand GBV, I think looking at the time as well, I think we need to understand what are the kinds of men that we have in South Africa, and what are some of these masculinities. Classicity, this masculinity is toxic. What do we mean? And when we box men and say men are that or men are not this, we need to understand that masculinities themselves are different, and our language at some time may apply what we call secondary victimization to some men who may otherwise be victims of this patriarchy as well. But that is a topic for another day. As I said earlier, that EGBV it's an area of academic concern and investigation which is ongoing. But before I wrap up this part of my discussion, as mentioned earlier, there are many reasons or explanations for gender-based violence, and we need to know them as well. Classicity, we are calling men to act against the GBV, and we must always interrogate them. There's individual reasons. Many studies have shown, in fact, that e-behavior, e-violence is learned both from men and women. And the studies that have been conducted around that have shown that young people who grow up in households characterized by e-violence are more likely to normalize violence, to be cool, and then they become violent to their counterparts. Talk about the issue of absent fathers, abusive present fathers as well. Another reason being economic reasons, lack of economic independence among women is also a key driver of gender-based violence, which is why, in fact, just last week we were marching to the city of Tshwane because of the economically excluding the women in the informal sector or the informal traders. So it is hard for women who are economically dependent on their male partners to live abusive relationships, And then thirdly, indaba culture, tradition, religion is very important. And I'm happy when it's institutions such as yourself who are facilitating these dialogues. Culturally, men are often placed in a powerful position in relation to women, and there's many, reasons, or there's many practices around that as well. practices such as ilobola, and then there's still practices such as ukutwala in other countries, in other cultures. It's still happening, unfortunately. Or Sharia law, where women are inherently told that Nina, as women, you are subordinate, or you will always be subordinate to men. But in conclusion of my remarks, I really want to mention something else that is very important, that I think as part of our mobilization, as we call men to act against GBV, consent. It may look a bit like I'm diverting a bit, but it's important that I mention a consent. A consent, what is consent? Consent is permission. It's simple. And that is why in our discussions we always say that no is a full sentence. So when a woman says no, that's it. There's no but, there's no what if, there's no whatever. No on its own, it's full sentence. So consent is an agreement between participants, for this context, for the sake of this conversation, between participants who agree or who are about to engage in sexual activity. And I think what is important to mention around the consent as well, because it also leads to gender-based violence in the consent. It's clear communication. As I said, no but, no if. If it consent, it must, if it was not communicated or if it was not granted, there must not be an assumption that the other party, consents. It must always be discussed each time. We've had instances of marital rape where a man rapes a woman because they are married or it's boyfriend and girlfriend, and then the argument is that I assumed because this thing we always do, there was no need for me or I should ask permission or whatever. Another thing that is important around the consent is that it can be withdrawn anytime. And these are part of our conversations need to clearly articulate these things. And then psychological or physiological responses do not equate to consent, e.g., an erection or an arousal. So, someone who's incapacitated also by drugs or alcohol cannot consent. A 16-year-old or younger person cannot consent even if they agree to have sexual intercourse with you. By law, that is null and void. So those are some of the issues that contribute to this gender-based violence, and we need to talk about these things as we try and galvanize men into taking responsibility for GBV. As a city, they must stop violence on women and children. These are the things that we should, clearly be articulating. So in conclusion, last conclusion now, men and women have been socialized differently, and we need to understand that masculinity and femininity, which is the opposite, by the way, they refer to different feelings and behavior that are expected of males and are expected of females at a particular time and place. And this is really a product of a socialization, and such socialization has been accomplished in many ways which are unintended and unconscious at some point. So in many societies, men are being rewarded for being aggressive, competitive, and career orientated, while girls are required to be, homely, to be gentle, and all that. And men have been trained to be direct, have been trained to command. Women have been trained to obey and serve, and sometimes through manipulation. And men are rated in professional settings. We know men are rated according to career advancement and all that, while women are evaluated by their domestic skills. So men and women are socialized differently. And if we're going to fight gender-based violence, we need to tap into that socialization. Yobana, men and women must act differently. And there is a lot of evidence for us that proves that even today, the sex role stereotypes are still alive, and they contribute to this violence. And unfortunately, there is no legislation that can ever genuinely achieve sex equality unless there are changes in the way in which men and women feel about themselves and about each other, and changing these roles or finding ways in which we can, try and make these masculinities positive or try to end gender-based violence is going to take a lot of work. It is a huge task that is ahead of us, guys, and unfortunately, we need to do a lot of things. I would have loved that we've had enough time to, try and elaborate more on some of these issues, but I've tried to, tap into small parts, bit and pieces of this and that with regards to the conversation itself. But I think I will pause there and yeah.
All right. Thank you.
I see there's questions coming in as well.
Thank you, Puti. It's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate that we don't have much time, because topics like these need quite a lot of time so that we engage Singeni and Zulu, because I'm sure there are quite a lot of questions that are arising as you are presenting. For instance, one would be interested or concerned over, okay, if you are going to be telling us or informing us rather about different forms of masculinities, it might seem as though the organization is just about to justify the actions of men, as we know that there are things like, there are sayings like men are trash, men are seen as trash in general. And then if now the organization comes and teaches us or teaches people about different forms of masculinities, it could maybe seem as though this is a justification of men's action. So the question that would arise is, okay, we know this form of masculinity is toxic and this one is different from that toxic one. But now the question is, what is the plan, or how do other men influence these maybe hegemonic men, the men who are under the hegemonic masculinity, which is maybe toxic? How are they influenced, or how are they pulled into this other form that's not toxic, so that we change this whole thing?
No, thank you for that. That is
While you wrap up with,
yeah. No, I'm saying that is a very good question and point that you are making. And I think I need to be very clear that there can never be justification for abuse or for violence in men and otherwise. That is why I think we are far ahead in the discussion and the conversation right now, because I think we can all agree that violence is wrong. And in fact, when there's issues of gender-based violence, we are always the first ones to come out and condemn them and go against fellow men who are committing these atrocities. But the significance of me trying to articulate the different kinds of men was that, remember, we want to make a call to men to act against gender-based violence, right? So this is not a call to articulate the wrong or to come here and reveal the statistics that so many men are raping or so many women have been raped. Yes. This, in my understanding, was a conversation to call men to act against GBV, right? And if you're going to call men to act against GBV, you need to be clear that and try and educate and enlighten people that there's different kinds of men. And then we've got these men who are a problem in the society. Not that the other group of men is good and all that, but we are saying that I, as Siyabulela, I may be a marginalized masculine man, or I may be a complicit. So we're trying to have all men finding themselves in these types of masculinities and reflecting deeply within their own actions to say that, so if I'm a hegemonic masculine man and I have been aggressive and competitive, how do I then, as part of a call to act against GBV, how do I get my act together? So the discussion is in no way trying to make any justification for anyone. In fact, the discussion is to say, amongst us, my daughter, we are different. Abanye bethu, they are violent, but we need to help them. We need to be on the same boat with them and help them. Abanye bethu, they are victims of our own violent actions. We need to have them also here. So you cannot call men to act against the GBV and then just say, stop doing this. And then you need to understand that men themselves are socialized differently. Remember, I mentioned, babanye bakhule emakhaya, violence was a way of life. How do you incorporate those men into the conversation? Abanye, they did not grow up in violent families, but they grew up in families whereby there was no father figure. How do you incorporate them? Other men, they are, they are gay men. Other men do not subscribe to heterosexuality. Other men, so I was trying to show that there's different kinds of men. And when we call men to act against GBV, we must call everyone with an understanding, Yobana. Men are different in as much as women are also different.
Thank you so much, Kutsia. You said this is now an organization, no longer a mere campaign. So in your closing remarks, since we are running out of time, in your closing remarks, could you please enlighten other men who are watching right now, who are interested in being part of the Not in My Name organization, the man who wants to be part of a cause that is against gender-based violence, the man that wants to give a helping hand or play a positive role in this Not in My Name organization, how do they join, or what would you encourage that they do in their small corners? Because sometimes, like we always say, charity begins at home and change starts with an individual. So what would you say to encourage these men, and what would you say to maybe, if there's a way of joining the organization, how do they join? And please just give us your closing remarks.
Yeah, so in closing, I remember my colleagues and I were having a discussion around not in my name and not in our name, right? And for me, I've always been passionate about the my, because when you say my, before you can be part of a collective, you are taking responsibility as a person, right? So I can be part of the collective, but when I'm alone in my own house with my family, with my wife or my girlfriend, or with my partner, I can be violent, or I can have a woman next door being abused and do nothing about it. But and I act like I'm a good man. So it starts with you as an individual, which is why it's not in my name. But I think also one other thing that is very important is to understand that topic of gender-based violence is very, very, very broad and wide. And I like how you mentioned it, but I would need more time to delve into all these things. And the mistake that we always make as Abantu is we want to talk about the topic, sifake yonke into, talk about everything all at once. I do need to say that it's important that if we're going to say we are calling men to take responsibility or to act against the GBV, the discussion then must speak directly to men, right? And when that happens, it should not be viewed with a lens that says, or within a lens that would now want to look like it's an invalidation of the pain of women or females, right? And I think that is very important. But in closing, I do want to say that South African men, both previous perpetrators or rehabilitated perpetrators, those who are good men, because I do believe as well that they're good men in this country. Those men, they need to stand up. They need to stand up and do something about the rates of GBV in South Africa. And those men who are in their little corners, who feel that they are not included and they're not part of the discourse because bona, they may otherwise be marginalized, they need to come out and be part of the conversation. Not in My Name International is an organization for all men, not only heterosexual men who are not even, gender identifying, all men are welcomed. Come to us, educate us, assist us. We are always happy to learn and to unlearn what we think is correct now. We are Not In My Name International on all social media platforms. On Instagram, on Twitter at Not In My Name, in Facebook, Not In My Name International, Twitter as well. But mna igama lami Siyabulela Jentile, and Siyabulela Jentile on all social media platforms except for Twitter. On Twitter, I'm at Siya_Gentile. I'm always happy to people. Amajita must come. Let us have conversations. Let us talk. Let us be transparent. Let us have these discussions and continue the discourse beyond the 16 days of activism. I think that is one thing that we need. When the 10th of December comes, we need men who will say, 16 days is but we are still going to continue with the discussion. We're still going to continue and become a better man. And I think that is what we need. And lastly, we need, guys, if we're going to find a long and lasting solution to gender-based violence, we need to create the spaces where men talk, allow men to talk, to raise their frustrations. Let us find out what goes on inside the mind or the psyche of a violent man. I would have loved to also make some recommendations as well, but that would be for totally and completely different audience. But for this one, I think it is very important that we call men, all men, to act against gender-based violence, whichever way positive, act against GBV. I think Mandibamba Posisi. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pretty. Just to add on the last part, you're calling to men to have platforms where they can express themselves, they can talk to each other about these matters. I saw a post one of the days where he was encouraging other men that kuyiwe entabeni kuyofundiswa abafana about these things and ubudoda as a whole. So yeah, it is a good initiative. I'm very sorry to the viewers which we could not get their questions, but there were amazwi from all the likes of Umzalwane Ntokozo and others who were in support of the Not In My Name organization and the cause, where they were saying the Not In My Name is here to be the difference that we need. Yes, Makwande, okuhle kodwa futhi siyabulela kakhulu. We thank you as the Wesley Guild SA team and the Wesley Guild members across the country, Methodist members, non-Methodists who were here part of the conversation. Abafumene ulwazi. We pray so much that ingapheli and that the organization reaches even to the younger boys, because they also need to get influence at the very young age, so that when they become men, they become better men. We need a better nation for our children. We need the nation to be better than it is now. We forgot to pray when we started. Okay.
Oh.
Yes,
no, I was saying,
you may
sorry to interject. I'm seeing some of these. I don't know. Are we shutting down? I know I also need to rush, but if maybe we can take an extra 2-3 minutes, maybe I can try to quickly.
Please, if you can see them from your side, please respond to a few questions.
Oh, okay. But these ones, because I connected to my thing as well. So, and there's no bonus zone, but you mentioned the brother on top also. I can also see we had a question around, do you check out some of the victims or other people you assisted once you are done with their case support? Of course we do. We do say, but in fact, in the past, this is something that we did not do, and it was a mistake on our side. That is why now we recently joined by a lady who's specifically tasked to do that. So what she does is she's an outreach administrator. She's the one communicating with the victims, with perpetrators, with the police, with all those people. So now we are able to, go back and say, we've assisted you, how are things going and all that. But we always encourage people that when the organization has helped you, help other people as well. You don't necessarily need to come back to us. You can continue helping other people, or you can always come back to the organization and volunteer as well. And then, I'm interested in hearing your view regarding mobilizing in rural areas and townships where GBV is very high and people don't want to realize or be made aware of the social ills that exist in our spaces. How can we get the young and old to also join to call against GBV in underdeveloped areas? So, and I'll talk for ourselves. So, My Name International is now in different areas, but unfortunately, the country here to South Africa is that we are reactionaries. So before something happens, abantu, they are not able to mobilize themselves. Okanye they get discouraged until kubekho case rape ekuhlaleni okanye kubekho case femicide. Then people start wanting to mobilize themselves. And as an organization, we've got dialogues that we do in different communities with different cause. Like today, I know some of my team members were in Atteridgeville, on a similar discussion. And personally, I also do work with the Department of Justice and Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, whereby I sometimes facilitate their under the tree dialogues, which are dialogues, where men are gathered, whether in a community hall or in a, municipal council, and then we have discussions, we talk, I facilitate those for them. So unfortunately, we need to be the change that we want to see. It's us that must go out into our communities. So as we born was politicians, and unless they want you to go out and vote. So it is our responsibility. And lastly, Sisendi Bonayo, it was regarding cultural practices that promote or rather are oppressive to women. How do we address GBV in cultural spaces without losing our cultural identity? This is very important as well. And I like what you mentioned about what you were saying, an initiative you can dive in and all that. I think we can a culture evolves, and as it evolves, I think we can find ways of evolving a culture, but while sticking to the true core of who we are as abantu bamnyama. And if anything, if it's possible, that we also look at the curriculum, how is it structured? Because unfortunately, some of these boys in other cultures, they would go there and then babuye pa delelo mama babu, and then we need to ask ourselves, what kind of curriculum do we have in such spaces as well? So we need to talk. We need to talk with our elders. That's why our conversations must include lamaxhego asezilalini nasezilokishini. They must be part of the conversation as well, to say that we want to hold on to our culture, but the culture yethu somewhere somehow kukho apho siyilahle khona, because abantwana bethu they have they've used, or they're using the same culture now to do or to perpetuate gender-based violence. How do we now deal with that? As I said, I may not necessarily have all the answers, but I do believe in one thing: there is nothing a dialogue cannot solve. So our dialogues must include the custodians of our culture, the custodians of our traditions. These are the people we need to have as part of our discourse. We need to have traditional leaders, have them being a part of our GBV discussions. We need to have everyone. We need to have faith-based organizations such as yourselves, which I must say before I leave that I'm very, very thankful for this opportunity, guys. And I do appreciate the work that you are doing. I do follow your work. I do follow some of the sermons, and I think what you have done today, please continue doing it. It may look like a mere conversation, but you have no idea. The platform that you've given us as activists, it is very huge to make this call. I think I will stop there, my sister. I don't know if there's any other questions on your side that you can see. Otherwise, I
No
think
other question.
Vala.
Yes, but
No other
there's no
questions
other
there.
question from my side that I can see. It's just Mbulelo Siyabulela once again. UThixo akwandisele. Kokwande okuhle kodwa empilweni yakho nakwi-organization, may it grow and may it be impactful communities. We want to see a better version of men. We want to see less perpetrators. We want to see more people, more men protecting women and children, not only by mouth, even by action. Can we please close in prayer? Can we please wrap this up in prayer? Lord, we thank you so much. We thank you, Lord, for the grace. Father, and not only did we get the opportunity to live throughout the day, but you gave us nalena okanye sifundisane Thixo namandla onke ngeendlela zokuphila. Bawona mandla, you say it in your word, you give us the commandment that we love one another, and by that shall all men know that we are your disciples. Bawona mandla, sincede ke Nkosi, sincede isizwe sethu. Bawona mandla onke, khusela abantwana, ukhusela omama besizwe sase-South Africa, Thixo namandla onke, and please, Lord Almighty, ubongezelela amandla abo bhuti nabo tata who are part of the organization at Not in My Name, and also any other man in the country who is against the GBV and who is standing against it. More men like that, be in a very safer place as women and children. Protect us all, because even men are not safe. For you say in your word, whatever we ask, wena uthembekile ukusenzele. Siyathanda ke Nkosi egameni likaYesu Kristu Nkosi yethu yaseNazaretha. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, my sister.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye to the viewers
Bye.
at home. See you tomorrow. We live.